the diplomatic masquerade. The gleaming spires of the Galactic Council headquarters stretched impossibly high into the crimson sky of Zentera Prime, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the light of 3 dying suns. Ambassador Elena Vasquez adjusted her simple black diplomatic uniform and smirked as she watched the various alien species bustling about the grand plaza below. Each one moved with the arrogance of a species that believed themselves superior to the upstart humans who had somehow stumbled into galactic politics. "How quaint," she muttered under her breath, her voice carrying just enough sarcasm to make her aide, Marcus Chun, chuckle nervously. "Ambassador! Please remember we're supposed to be the humble newcomers," Marcus whispered, his eyes darting around to towering alien dignitaries surrounding them. Elena's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Oh, don't worry, Marcus. I'll play my part perfectly. After all, we wouldn't want to upset our gracious hosts who think we're nothing more than clever monkeys who learn to use fire." The massive doors of the council chamber hissed open with a sound like escaping steam. The architecture inside was designed to intimidate, with soaring ceilings that seemed to disappear into darkness and seats arranged in concentric circles that made the human delegation appear tiny and insignificant at the center. High Counselor Zethrak of the Vorthan Empire rose from his throne-like seat, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a diplomatic smile among the species. His scales shimmered with an oily iridescence, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Welcome, humans, to this emergency session of the Galactic Council," Zethrak announced, his words dripping with condescension. "We have called you here to discuss the disturbing reports of your species' military capabilities." Elena remained perfectly still, her face a mass of innocent confusion. "I'm sorry, High Counselor, but I'm not sure what you mean. Disturbing reports." A ripple of what could only be described as alien laughter swept through the chamber. The sound was unsettling, like the chittering of insects mixed with the grinding of metal on stone. Admiral Crax of the Hegemony Defense Fleet stepped forward, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of barely contained aggression. His exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights, and his compound eyes fixed on Elena with predatory intensity. "Do not insult our intelligence, human," Crax hissed through his mandibles. "Our scouts have observed your so-called defensive exercises in the Sol system. What we witnessed defies explanation." Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside Elena, but she remained perfectly composed. Her smile never wavered, though something dangerous flickered behind her eyes. "I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific, Admiral," Elena replied sweetly. "We conduct many routine training exercises. Perhaps you could enlighten us about which particular drill caught your attention?" The silence that followed was electric with tension. Counselor Myrax of the Stellan Collective, a being that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a living constellation, pulsed with agitated colors as she spoke. "Your routine training exercise involved a single human vessel destroying 17 of our most advanced monitoring drones in under 30 seconds. Myrax's voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder. This same vessel then proceeded to demonstrate maneuvers that should be physically impossible according to our understanding of space-time physics." Elena tilted her head thoughtfully, as if trying to recall a minor detail from a busy schedule. "Oh, that exercise. Yes, I believe Lieutenant Rodriguez was testing some new navigation protocols. Did we accidentally damage some of your equipment? I do apologize. We'll be happy to compensate you for any losses." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Admiral Crax's exoskeleton made clicking sounds as he struggled to control his rage. "Navigation protocols?" Crax's voice rose to a screech. "Your lieutenant performed a barrel roll around our flagship while traveling at 0.7 light speed, then executed a complete vector reversal without deceleration. Our greatest physicists claim such maneuvers would tear any known vessel apart." A slow, predatory smile spread across Elena's face. "Well, Admiral, perhaps your physicists need to expand their understanding of the universe. After all, humans have always been rather creative when it comes to problem-solving." High Counselor Zethrak slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing through the chamber like a thunderclap. His yellow eyes blazed with fury as he leaned forward on his throne. "Enough games, human. We know what you are hiding. Our intelligence networks have intercepted fragments of your military communications. Words like Project Pandora and Protocol 7 appear repeatedly. What are these programs? Elena's expression shifted, the diplomatic mask slipping just enough to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. When she spoke, her voice carried a hint of steel that made several alien delegates shift nervously in their seats. High Counselor, those are classified military designations. Surely you understand that every species maintains certain defensive secrets. Would you share the specifications of your own weapon systems with us? We are not the newcomers claiming to be peaceful explorers. Zethrak roared, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. We have ruled this galaxy for millennia while your species was still learning to bang rocks together. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Marcus held his breath, waiting for Elena's response. When it came, her voice was so quiet that the chamber's acoustics had to amplify it for everyone to hear. How very interesting that you mention rocks, High Counselor, Elena said, her tone conversational but somehow terrifying. Tell me, how familiar are you with human history? Irrelevant primitive barbarism. Zethrak dismissed with a wave of his clawed hand. Elena's laugh was soft and utterly without humor. Oh, but I think it's quite relevant. You see, humans have always excelled at one particular thing. We're exceptionally good at taking whatever tools we have available and finding creative ways to use them against our enemies. She stood slowly, her movement fluid and controlled. Despite being the smallest being in the chamber, she somehow seemed to command the space around her. For instance, Elena continued, her voice taking on the cadence of a teacher addressing particularly slow students. Early humans took simple rocks and learned to chip them into spear points. Later, we discovered that certain rocks could be heated and shaped into swords. Eventually, we figured out how to split atoms within rocks to create weapons that could level entire cities. The chamber was dead silent now, every alien delegate hanging on her words. The fascinating thing about humans, you see, is that we never really change our fundamental nature. We just get better tools to work with. Ambassador Quillith of the Sanctuary Worlds, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into rainbow patterns, finally found her voice. What exactly are you implying, human? Elena turned to face Quillith directly, her smile never wavering, but her eyes growing colder by the second. Elena turned to face Quillith directly, her smile never wavering, but her eyes growing colder by the... I'm not implying anything, Ambassador. I'm stating a simple fact. You've all spent so much time studying our ships, our weapons, our technology, but you've made a critical error in your analysis, which is... Admiral Krax demanded through grinding mandibles. You assume that what you've observed represents the full extent of human capabilities. The words fell into the chamber like stones into still water, creating ripples of unease that spread to the alien delegates. Elena could practically taste their growing fear, and she found she rather enjoyed it. That's impossible, Counselor Myrax pulsed, her colors shifting to alarm patterns. Our intelligence agencies are the most sophisticated in the galaxy. We've mapped every human military installation, cataloged every vessel in your fleets. Have you? Elena asked innocently. How wonderfully thorough of you. I'm sure our defense ministry will be fascinated to learn about your comprehensive surveillance of our supposedly sovereign territory. High Counselor Zethrak's scales began to change color, shifting from their usual green to an angry crimson that signaled extreme agitation among his species. You dare accuse the Council of improper intelligence gathering? Oh, I'm not accusing anyone of anything improper, Elena replied with mock sweetness. After all, spying on potential threats is perfectly reasonable behavior. We certainly don't hold it against you. The casual admission that humans were aware of the surveillance sent another wave of unease through the assembled aliens. If the humans knew they were being watched, what did that say about the quality of the Galactic Council's intelligence operations? The question that interests me, Elena continued, beginning to pace slowly around the center of the chamber, is why you would call an emergency session to discuss routine training exercises. Unless, of course, those exercises demonstrated capabilities that concerned you. Your vessel's performance was beyond anything we believed possible for human technology, Admiral Krax admitted grudgingly. And yet, Elena said, stopping directly in front of Krax and looking up at his towering form without a trace of intimidation, Lieutenant Rodriguez was piloting one of our older training craft. Nothing particularly special about it, really. Standard issue for junior officers learning basic maneuvers. The silence that followed this revelation was profound. Elena could see the calculations running behind alien eyes as the implications sank in. If a training vessel operated by a junior officer could outperform their best surveillance technology, what could human military vessels accomplish? "You're lying," Counselor Myrax stated flatly, though her pulsing colors betrayed her uncertainty. Elena shrugged elegantly. "Am I? Marcus, would you be so kind as to show our host the specifications for Lieutenant Rodriguez's training vessel?" Marcus activated a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber. The technical readouts were in standard Galactic Council format, making them easily readable by all present species. What they showed was a vessel that appeared unremarkable by galactic standards, with power output and structural ratings that suggested modern capabilities at best. This is what destroyed our drones. Admiral Krax's voice was barely above a whisper. "Well, destroyed is such an ugly word," Elena said with theatrical wince. Rodriguez prefers to think of it as aggressive recycling. The joke fell flat in the tense atmosphere, which seemed to amuse Elena even more. "But yes, Admiral, that's the vessel in question. Quite ordinary, really. We use hundreds just like it for basic pilot certification. Every human military academy has dozens gathering dust in their training hangars." High Counselor Zethrak's voice was strained when he finally spoke. "If that represents your standard training equipment, what capabilities do your actual military vessel possess?" Elena's smile became positively predatory. Now that High Counselor would be telling, "And as I'm sure you understand, some things must remain classified for security of our species." She paused, letting the words sink in before delivering her next statement with a casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "Though I will say this much. The Soul Defense Force has been operating under very strict engagement protocols since we joined the galactic community. We wouldn't want to accidentally intimidate our new neighbors with an overly aggressive display of force." The chamber erupted into chaos as alien delegates began talking all at once, their various languages creating a cacophony of confusion and alarm. Elena stood calmly in the center of it all, watching with evident satisfaction as the carefully controlled diplomatic meeting devolved into pandemonium. High Counselor Zethrak slammed his staff repeatedly against the floor, the thunderous impacts finally restoring some semblance of order. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of barely controlled panic. "Are you saying that humans have been holding back?" Elena's expression became thoughtful, as if she were considering how to phrase her response for maximum impact. When she finally spoke, her words were measured and deliberate. "High Counselor, let me put it this way. When a new species joins a galactic community, it's considered polite to avoid making the established powers feel inadequate. We've simply been following proper diplomatic etiquette." The implications of her statement hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. If humans had been restraining themselves out of politeness, what would happen if that restraint were ever removed? As if reading their thoughts, Elena's smile widened just enough to reveal teeth that suddenly seemed very sharp indeed. "After all," she continued in a voice that was pure silk wrapped around steel, "we wouldn't want anyone to think we were showing off. The emergency council session had been adjourned in chaos 6 hours ago, but the aftermath was still reverberating through every level of galactic society." Elena Vasquez sat in her private quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel, savoring a cup of genuine Earth coffee, while watching the news feeds from across the galaxy. The reports were deliciously predictable. "Marcus, come listen to this," she called her aide, who was hunched over a dozen communication screens trying to manage the diplomatic fallout. The Vorthan News anchor on the main display was practically vibrating with barely contained hysteria. Sources within the Galactic Council report that human military capabilities may exceed previous estimates by orders of magnitude. High Command has issued a classified alert to all fleet commanders, advising extreme caution when operating near human territories. Elena laughed, the sound sharp of vindictive satisfaction. Orders of magnitude. If only they knew how conservative that estimate really is. Marcus looked up from his screens with exhaustion written across his features. Ambassador, we're receiving urgent communications from 17 different species requesting immediate diplomatic conferences. The Hegemony Defense Fleet has pulled back all vessels from our border zones, and the Stellar Banking Consortium is asking if we'd be interested in a significant credit extension for infrastructure development. Fear and greed, Elena mused, taking another sip of coffee. The two most reliable motivators in galactic politics. Though I have to admit, I'm impressed by how quickly word is spreading. A priority alert chimed on the main communication array. Marcus activated it, and the holographic image of Fleet Admiral Sarah Kane materialized in the center of the room. Her weathered face was set in grim lines, but Elena could see amusement dancing in her steel-gray eyes. "Elena, I hope you're proud of yourself," Kane said without preamble. "Half the galaxy thinks we're about to declare war on everyone, and the other half is trying to surrender preemptively." "Sarah, how wonderful to hear from you," Elena replied with exaggerated cheerfulness. "I take it the Council's intelligence networks have been busy sharing their concerns with their respective home governments?" Kane's expression shifted to something that might have been a smile on anyone less disciplined. Busy is one word for it. The Hegemony sent a formal inquiry asking about our Pandora Protocol capabilities. Apparently, they're convinced it's some kind of planet-killing superweapon. Elena nearly choked on her coffee. Project Pandora? That's just a code name for the new mess hall scheduling system. The Marines kept complaining about the food service rotation conflicts. "I know that, and you know that," Kane said, her voice dry with military humor. "But Admiral Krax doesn't know that. Neither does anyone else who's been intercepting our communications." Amazing how sinister, perfectly innocent military jargon can sound when taken out of context. Marcus looked up from his screens again, his expression mixing disbelief with growing understanding. "Wait, are you telling me that most of their intelligence about our secret weapons programs is actually misinterpreted bureaucratic communications?" "Welcome to the intelligence game, kid," Kane replied. "Half of it is educated guesswork, and the other half is paranoid assumption. The trick is knowing which half you're dealing with at any given moment." Elena set down her coffee and activated a secure holographic display showing current fleet positions throughout human space. Even she had to admit it was an impressive sight. Dozens of vessels moving in perfect coordination through the void between stars. "Speaking of fleet positions, Sarah, I don't suppose you made any adjustments to our patrol schedules recently?" Kane's grin became distinctly predatory. "Funny you should ask. After your little performance at the Council, I thought it might be prudent to conduct some expanded training exercises. Nothing too flashy, you understand. Just standard maneuvers." "Standard maneuvers," Elena repeated, her tone suggesting she understood exactly what Kane meant by that phrase. "Of course, if other species happen to observe these exercises and draw their own conclusions about our capabilities, well, that's hardly our fault, is it?" Before Elena could respond, another priority alert interrupted them. This time, the communication was coming directly from the Galactic Council's emergency frequency, marked with the highest security classifications. High Counselor Zethrak's image appeared alongside Kane's, his reptilian features even more agitated than they had been during the council session. His scales were cycling through colors Elena had never seen before, suggesting emotional states that probably didn't have human equivalents. "Ambassador Vasquez," Zethrak began, his voice carefully controlled but trembling with underlying tension. "We need to talk." Elena glanced at Kane, who nodded slightly before cutting her connection. The Admiral's parting words were barely audible, but clearly intended for Elena's ears alone. "Give them hell, Ambassador." Once Kane's image faded, Elena turned her full attention to the High Counselor. She could practically smell his desperation through the holographic connection. "High Counselor, how unexpected to hear from you so soon. I trust the Council has had time to digest our earlier conversation." Zethrak's claws scraped against his throne's armrests as he struggled to maintain diplomatic composure. "Ambassador, there appears to have been a significant misunderstanding regarding human military capabilities. We would very much like to arrange a more detailed discussion of your defense protocols. A misunderstanding? Elena's voice carried just the right note of innocent confusion. I'm not sure what you mean, High Counselor. Our position has always been perfectly clear. Humans are a peaceful species committed to diplomatic solutions and mutual cooperation. Yes, but your earlier comment suggested that human forces have been operating under restrictive guidelines. Elena pretended to consider this carefully, letting the silence stretch until Zethrak began to fidget visibly. Well, naturally we've been following standard diplomatic protocols since joining the galactic community. It would be terribly rude to appear too aggressive during our integration period. We're still the new species on the block, after all. These standard diplomatic protocols, Zethrak said slowly, would they include limitations on weapons deployment, ship performance, or tactical capabilities? Oh, absolutely, Elena replied with enthusiasm that was probably terrifying in its implications. The Defense Ministry issued very strict guidelines about maintaining appropriate force levels during peacetime operations. We wouldn't want to alarm our neighbors with unnecessary displays of military capability. Zethrak's color cycling intensified, and these guidelines would be comprehensive? Elena's smile became razor-sharp. High Counselor, let me assure you that human military forces have been operating at exactly the level deemed appropriate for peaceful coexistence with our galactic neighbors. No more, no less. The careful phrasing was not lost on Zethrak. If humans have been restricting themselves to levels deemed appropriate for peace, what would happen if circumstances changed? What would they be capable of if those restrictions were removed? Ambassador, Zethrak said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Hypothetically speaking, if these diplomatic restrictions were to be adjusted, what might the galactic community expect to observe? Elena leaned back in her chair, the picture of casual confidence. Hypothetically? Well, High Counselor, that would depend entirely on the circumstances requiring such an adjustment. Different threats would naturally call for different responses. Could you be more specific? I suppose it would be similar to the difference between a training exercise and actual combat operations. Elena mused thoughtfully. You know how it is. During training, everyone follows the safety protocols, uses standard equipment, operates within established parameters. But in a real emergency, well, you use whatever tools are necessary to get the job done. The implications hung in the air between them like a sword suspended by the thinnest of threads. Zethrak seemed to be calculating something, his eyes darting back and forth as he processed the potential ramifications. These tools you mention, he said carefully, would they include technologies or capabilities that the Galactic Council's intelligence services have not yet observed? Elena's laugh was soft and genuinely amused. High Counselor, you've been monitoring human space for 2 years now. In that entire time, have you ever seen humanity face a genuine existential threat? The question caught Zethrak off guard. Well, no, there have been minor border disputes, some piracy incidents, but nothing that could be classified as a serious military challenge. Exactly, Elena said, her tone taking on the quality of professor, explaining a fundamental principle to a struggling student. So you've only observed human forces operating under peaceful conditions, using peacetime protocols, with peacetime equipment, against peacetime threats. But surely your ships, your weapons, your military doctrine are all designed and optimized for wartime conditions. Elena finished smoothly. Just like every other species in the galaxy, I would assume. The difference is that most other species have had occasion to demonstrate their full capabilities during various conflicts over the millennia. Humans have been fortunate enough to avoid such circumstances since joining the galactic community. Zethrak's breathing had become noticeably labored. Are you saying that what we've observed represents only your peacetime military posture? High Counselor, I think you're overthinking this, Elena said with a dismissive wave. Human military doctrine is quite straightforward. We maintain appropriate force levels for the threats we face. If the threat level changes, we adjust accordingly. And what would constitute a change in threat level? Elena's expression became thoughtful, as if she were considering the question for the first time. Oh, the usual things, I suppose. Direct attacks on human colonies, attempts to blockade our trade routes, unprovoked aggression against our allies. You know, the sort of actions that would require a more robust response. How robust? The question was barely audible, but Elena's enhanced hearing caught it clearly. Well, that would depend on the severity of the threat, wouldn't it? Proportional response has always been a cornerstone of human military philosophy. We believe in using exactly as much force as necessary to resolve a conflict decisively. The word decisively seemed to echo in the silence that followed. Zethrak's color patterns had shifted to deep purples and blacks that Elena suspected indicated fear approaching panic levels. "Ambassador," Zethrak said finally, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining diplomatic protocol. "The Galactic Council would very much appreciate a more detailed briefing on human defensive capabilities. Perhaps we could arrange for a demonstration of your training exercises." Elena's smile became positively radiant. "What a wonderful idea. High Counselor, I'm sure Admiral Kane would be delighted to arrange something suitable. Of course, it would need to be a proper demonstration, not just the basic maneuvers we typically use for pilot certification." "Basic maneuvers?" Zethrak repeated weakly. "Oh, yes. The exercises your monitoring stations observed were just routine training for junior officers, hardly representative of our actual operational capabilities. But I'm sure we could arrange something more comprehensive for the Council's benefit." Elena activated her communication array and sent a priority message to Admiral Kane with a single line of text. "The Council would like to see what we can really do. Please arrange appropriate demonstration." The response came back within seconds. "With pleasure. Standard restrictions lifted." Elena looked directly at Zethrak as she replied, "All restrictions lifted. Full operational parameters authorized." The High Counselor's color patterns shifted to what Elena could only describe as the alien equivalent of abject terror. "Ambassador," Zethrak said desperately, "perhaps we should reconsider this demonstration. The Council may have been hasty in its concerns about human capabilities." "Oh, but High Counselor, you seem so interested in understanding our true defensive posture. It would be irresponsible of us not to provide a complete picture, don't you think?" Elena's tone was perfectly reasonable, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying than any threat could have been. "After all," she continued sweetly, "the Galactic Council has a right to know exactly what humanity brings to the galactic community. Complete transparency is essential for maintaining the trust and cooperation between our species." Zethrak seemed to be struggling with some internal conflict, his diplomatic training warring with his survival instincts. Finally, political necessity won out. "Very well, Ambassador. When would this demonstration take place?" "Oh, I think tomorrow should work nicely," Elena replied cheerfully. "That will give Admiral Kane time to select an appropriate task force and coordinate with your observation vessels. We'll want to make sure everyone gets a good view of the proceedings." As she ended the communication, Elena allowed herself a moment of pure, vindictive satisfaction. For too long, the established galactic powers had treated humanity as an amusing curiosity, a minor species to be patronized and manipulated. Tomorrow, they would learn exactly how catastrophic that miscalculation had been. Marcus looked up from his screens with an expression of awe and terror. "Ambassador, what exactly did we just agree to demonstrate?" Elena's smile was the smile of a predator that had finally decided to stop playing with his prey. "Everything, Marcus. We're going to show them absolutely everything." Outside the diplomatic vessel's viewports, human warships began moving into position throughout the Sol system. For the first time since joining the galactic community, they were no longer operating under peacetime restrictions. The galaxy was about to discover exactly what humanity had been holding back, and Elena Vasquez intended to enjoy every terrifying second of their education.